So here we are. Io Gordon, Kevin Wright. How you doing? You right?
Fantastic.
Yeah, good. And thank you very much for kind of taking the time out to come down and I guess get this interview together.
My pleasure.
I think there's kind of like a lot of people that kind of, might know about you. Obviously some people that might not have heard about you.
Sure.
So I thought it'd be good to kind of just figure out and find out, first of all, just a bit about like, who's Kevin Wright for people that might not know much, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, try and condense that as possible.
Yeah.
You don't want to spend the whole interview on my life story.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got into property back in 1983 when my mum bought me a book, Property Renovation Profits.
Sure.
I just took action on that, bought a wreck, sold it, or did it up, sold it, made a profit, banked the cash. Did that a few times. And over the intervening years, I've done buy to sell, buy to hold, rent out singly, rent out multiple times, like HMOs. I've bought land, built a house on it. So from a property aspect, I've always been in and around property. From a finance aspect, I've been brokering mortgages and other types of finance for over 20 years. And since the credit crunch, my focus has been predominantly on creative legal ways to buy property and effectively recycle your cash.
Sure.
So it's using my experience as a property finance broker, as well as my experience as a property investor, to show people that you can do more with less.
Sure.
So you can learn to recycle your cash and make whatever cash pot you've got stretch an awful lot further. Yeah.
Sure. And just rewinding a little bit, do you actually remember the first time we met? Or
Specifically, no, to be honest.
oh man,
Yeah.
is that because I wasn't wearing a top hat?
That would have been the defining factor.
Okay. I mean, obviously, from how I've kind of got into property, I always used to think that it wasn't worth looking at property because maybe I didn't have the money. Would you say getting into property investment is for the wealthy, i.e., maybe not for maybe people in a bit more poverty? Is it just for the wealthy? Is property just?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's for people that aspire to be wealthy.
Okay.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And you do need some cash to get into it, but maybe not as much as people think. You don't need hundreds of thousands. You don't even need tens of thousands, but you do, necessarily. But you do need some cash.
Okay.
Even if you're going to get in on a control basis where you control properties rather than buy them, that still takes cash. So solicitors have got to be paid. Valuers have got to be paid.
Sure.
There's going to be certain costs there, so you need some cash, but you probably don't need as much cash as you think from the outside looking in.
Okay, great. Because I know that you've kind of like more specialised with recycling cash. On that sort of basis, a lot of people sort of getting into property traditionally might be putting in sort of 25%, to actually buy to let properties. What's kind of wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with sort of that putting 25%?
Well, it's a way to get started, but what if you do that, what you typically find is that putting 25% into a property eats up your cash at an alarming rate.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if you're like most people, you'll come into property with a limited amount of cash. Some will have more than others, but everyone is limited to a degree. So if you're just putting 25% down, you're going to run out of cash quickly. In fact, if you're like most people in property, you're going to run out of cash before you run out of ambition.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So quickly you learn that you've got to be smarter with your cash. You've got to learn, first of all, how to put less cash down.
Sure.
And then how to get as much of that cash back out again as fast as you can.
Quick as possible.
If you've got any ambition to scale up what you want to do, then you've got to learn how either not to put 25% cash down in the first place, or how to get it back out again as quickly as you can.
Sure. For a lot of people that might have been thinking it was a lot easier sort of pre-recession 08, would you say it's like a lot harder now or easier now?
It's definitely harder. Because finance was so relaxed, so freely available, that you know, pretty much anyone could do it. Still, most people didn't do it, but you could do things then, but you can't do now. So, but everything evolves. So it's still possible, certainly, with a number of different strategies and a number of different ways to make deals in property work. Yeah. So, but it just doesn't work exactly how it used to work in pre-credit crunch days.
Sure.
So, yeah. So.
And because I know sort of like, you know, back in the day, a lot of people used to say that there was ways to kind of, where you could literally just refinance the same day. Is there any products where, you know, people can still refinance same day now, or ways to do that?
Yeah, you could, and I know that because I was brokering them.
Okay.
For investors.
Okay.
So you could refinance same day. Reality is now, no, not easily, and not legally and transparently, but you can get your money out, you know, within a few months of buying it. Normally you have to do something to a property to add value. Typically it's a refurb, but not always a refurb. But you have to do something to a property. Once you've done that, begin the process of refinancing. Now, you know, any mortgage is going to take a few weeks to go through. So, so it's not the same day, but it can be done, you know, within a few weeks.
So there's hope. There's hope.
Unquestionably.
Yeah, sure.
Unquestionably, there's hope.
I know a lot of the sort of stuff you sort of, you know, been doing is like a lot of bridging and stuff like that.
Sure.
With the bridging, because a lot of people kind of hear bridging and feel like, you know, oh my God, stay away from that.
Yep.
What's kind of the dangers for people if they are bridging? What could be some of the dangers in like bridging finance to buy a property?
The danger is not knowing what you're doing.
No, okay.
Yeah, okay. Bit like driving a car. If you've never learned to drive a car, that's pretty dangerous too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
So the danger is jumping into it without understanding what you're doing, because it, you know, it can be a scary thing to do.
Sure.
So you need to really understand what it is, how it works, and how you apply it. You know, typically people underestimate the costs. They underestimate without any sort of guidance or instruction. They underestimate how long it's going to take them to pay back the bridger. So if it's a refurb, they underestimate how long that's going to take. If they're refinancing, they underestimate how long that's going to take, and if they're selling it on, they underestimate how long that's going to take. So the
catastrophe.
Yeah, well, the dangerous thing is you get to the point where it's the day you're meant to repay the bridging loan, and because you didn't factor in the right time frame, you can't do it. So then you get into penalties, and that's when it gets sort of even more expensive. Yeah, very scary.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that and understanding the flexibility of it. I mean, bridgers will do things that mortgage lenders would never do. So they've got a greater flexibility. They'll allow you to do things that mortgage lenders will not do. So it's a very flexible tool, but you need to understand it. So you know, and that's what I've been doing. You know, since the credit crunch, I've been helping people to understand how to intelligently use bridging finance. Now, the common perception of bridging is it's the last resort of the desperate investor.
Sure.
If you understand it, then it can be the first resort or the first choice of the intelligent investor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you can use it with a degree of elegance and sophistication, then it becomes a very powerful tool that can get you into deals that you couldn't do any other way.
Great. What would you say has been like maybe like the worst thing you've seen happen where it's gone horribly wrong with bridging or anything else? You seen some pretty bad things in your time?
Not that many really, because the real bad things I don't get to see because I'm not involved.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the people that I mean, we've brokered, you know, in the last decade, we've brokered literally hundreds of bridging loans, and that's no exaggeration.
Sure.
And because we've been involved in that, the vast majority of those have gone fine. You know, occasionally someone miscalculates, and a typical thing. I mean, we weren't involved in it, but I was talking to someone last week. The planning permission that they budgeted to take in 10 to 12 weeks actually took 7 months. simply because it got declined twice. So they had to submit it for it got through on the third time.
Oh,
Now, that screwed up the time frame because they didn't anticipate or they didn't check sufficiently what they were going to ask for planning would be acceptable to the planners. So it was a lack of due diligence at the front end of the project on working out what was likely to be accepted with the planners and not learning the lessons quick enough, and having to have 3 goes at planning instead of getting it right first or even second time. So it's a lack of understanding what you get into the project you're getting into in one respect or another. Yeah.
Is there anything people could maybe do to kind of safeguard that, or is it just a case of trying to get better guidance, or maybe speaking to a better broker, or?
It can be all of those things, really. There are plenty of good mortgage brokers around, and excellent mortgage brokers, and because they're good at what they do every day, and that's mortgages. But if they're not doing bridging on a daily basis, like we've done for the last decade, they can't have that same level of expertise. It's not criticism. It's just an observation.
Sure.
So you need to be guided by people that are specialists in what they do. And if there's any planning involved, be guided by a planning consultant. There's often a false economy is to try and evade costs that you think are eroding your profit by getting professionals involved, when actually they would actually save you time
and money a lot.
By just getting you on the right path a lot quicker. So yeah, a planning consultant would probably got that deal through first time that we were just talking about.
Sure.
So it's about
getting to save the cost, and then
it turns out to be a false economy because you actually spend what you would have spent and possibly more.
Kevin, like a lot of people, I'm sure that you've obviously worked with thousands of people, and sometimes I come across a lot of people, always in different kind of situations, asking different questions about what they should kind of do based on the capital that they've got. What would you say to someone that's maybe actually got quite a bit of cash, and maybe they're thinking they should actually just use their own because they've actually got it rather than borrowing? Would you say it'd be better to use their own to save on interest, or?
I think it's a very powerful argument for using the cash you've got now, but I also understand the reason why they don't, and I think it's a false reason. So if people look at the practicalities of it, if you've got the ability to buy a property cash and do something to it to add value, then as you alluded to, you've got 0 borrowing cost. Now, if you're not paying borrowing costs, clearly that's going to increase your profits.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So it makes a deal more profitable. So if you can, you should. It makes perfect sense because your money left in the bank is probably going to earn you a fraction of 1% interest.
Sure.
That money's better employed in a property where you're creating value. Now, the argument for not doing it is, well, if I tie my cash up in a deal, then I'm going to miss out on other subsequent deals that I might want to do. That's the reasoning behind it. But what that belies is it's a lack of understanding. It's a lack of understanding that if you've invested your cash in property A and property B comes along and it's a brilliant deal and you don't want to let it go, then a bridging lender will always lend you a property B by taking a charge on property A as well. So you have one bridging loan against both properties, and as long as they're more or less an equal value, you can borrow not only the 100% of the purchase price of property B, but you can cover the stamp duty, you can cover the refurb costs or the improvement costs, and you can cover the interest too. So you can literally do, in the right circumstances, a no cash down deal on property B by leveraging the cash you've got tied up in property A. So you could actually do both deals, and you only start incurring interest costs when you need to.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, so I guess the sort of argument as well is, I guess if you buy property A and you don't actually find property B, then you've definitely won, because your money would have been sitting there anyway.
And that's the point. You know, it depends how prolific you are at finding deals.
Yeah.
You know, if you're finding deals week after week after week, then okay, maybe you use finance and minimise your deposit on multiple deals. But if you don't really know when property B is going to come along, then just sink your cash into property A, incur no costs until it comes along. You know, but it's not the restriction that people think it is.
So basically, if you got your cash, put it in, save money, then maybe you can fly in a chopper one day.
Maybe you can, absolutely, yeah. There we are, look, yeah. They're queuing up, aren't they?
Yeah.
Excellent.
So, I mean, another thing, Kevin, like, obviously, you know, a lot of different people are, you know, sometimes from different backgrounds that get into property and just in all walks of life, really. And I guess where I've sort of come from, you know, my sort of environments, sometimes I've been around a lot of people that might not be starting off with too much cash. What kind of figure would you say people could start with just to kind of get going for people that might think, you know, they just literally haven't got enough?
Well, I think it depends where you define get going by controlling property or buying property.
Sure, maybe buying.
Okay, so with buying property, and it's really, you know, controlling property is a great place to start.
Sure.
But you wouldn't want to be doing it for 20 to 30 years because, you know, wealth is attracted to assets. So it's what you own that ultimately is going to provide you wealth, not what you control, in the vast majority of cases. So how much you need to get going, really, on buying a property is going to depend to a large degree on which part of the UK you're going to focus on. Sure. So clearly, you need more cash to buy in more expensive parts of the UK. You know, so I mean, we're here in London today. Clearly you're going to need bigger chunks of cash if you're going to go in London. But if you go out of London, the further away you go out, the less cash you would need. But I think realistically, just to be starting off, you've got to be looking at 10 to 20 grand, I would say, in the cheaper parts of the country.
Sure.
I mean, you might occasionally trip over a deal where you can do less than that, but deals that work are going to be just really smaller and smaller opportunities. So
sure.
yeah,
buy caravans and stuff.
Yeah, and I think you'd need to be looking to flip initially to build your cash pot. If you're starting off from that quite modest base, if you're trying to build a portfolio from that, you're going to be really limited on where you can buy, what value you can buy at. So maybe flipping a couple of properties and building yourself up to 50k plus in cash is going to get you into bigger deals. So it might not give you the acceleration that you initially want, and it might think you're taking longer to get where you want to get to, particularly if you want to build a portfolio. But you know, it's a question of, you know, it's a marathon. Property investing is a marathon, not a sprint. So you know, sometimes you've got to take a diversion and not do exactly what you want to do to help you get to where you want to get to. Sure. In the longer run. Yeah. So you know, sometimes you have to flip.
Sure.
To get yourself.
When would you say, like, it is a good time for people to actually start looking at property? Because, you know, most people don't sort of come out of college and start looking at property. When would you say a good time is? Is it when literally you've saved up the money? Is it when should people start actually looking at this as a prospect, do you reckon? In school, college?
I guess when well, they're certainly not going to teach you property investing in any recognised mainstream education environment. So it's going to be something you have to come to of your own, and you know, I mean, the time when it's right for you, you know.
Sure.
Now, some people get the property bug. You know, I was at the Property Investors Awards last night, and the new investor of the year was a 19-year-old lad straight out of college.
Crazy. Yeah.
Okay, so you know, he's clearly got the bug earlier than others. For me, I got it in my mid-20s. Other people get it in their 40s and the 50s. There is no right time. But I guess the time to start educating yourself is when you get it. You know, people have that realization, you know, that light bulb moment, whatever you want to call it. Suddenly, in a way that it never did before, property makes sense.
Sure.
And from that day on, even if you're not buying property, start educating yourself on property, start reading about property, start watching videos about property, start learning, start reading books, going to property meetings. So start educating yourself, and as long as you're moving forward not necessarily in terms of what you're doing, but in terms of what you're learning, then you're growing as a person. And you know, that education process can take into account formal courses, not always, but you know, people decide what's right for them.
Just another thing as well, Kev. I mean, obviously, like a lot of people sometimes find themselves in situations where they don't even know that, you know, there's a credit database that kind of looks at your patterns and defaults and that kind of stuff. Certainly for myself, like, it wasn't until I actually tried to apply for something that I realised I actually had a default. I didn't realise there was actually a database. What would you say to maybe someone who's found herself maybe, you know, maybe just with a CCJ they found out about? Is it over for them? Like, is that it?
Not necessarily. It's if they've found out they've got something like that, they should settle it as quickly as they can.
Sure.
Because there's a difference between an unsatisfied and a satisfied county court judgment or default. So, you know, if you still owe money and that's causing the problem, then the first thing to do would be to pay it back. Or if you think there's some legitimate reason why you don't owe it, get that corrected off your credit file by contacting the creditor themselves. So mainstream, if your credit's not perfect, mainstream mortgage lending is going to be closed to you, at least for a few years, because most things drop off after about 6 years.
Sure.
So, but that might close you off. The mistake is to think that not being able to get mortgages means you can't get any finance, because this is where bridging finance comes in again, because they are a lot more lenient in the way they look at people with adverse credit. It doesn't really matter what you've got in your credit history in the past. Bridges will still lend to you. Now, you can't do a buy to own strategy, so you can't build a portfolio if you can't get mortgages, or you find it difficult to get mortgages, or the mortgages you can get have a too high a rate. But what you can do is buy and sell. Buy and sell using bridging finance as the way to finance your deals. Do something to add value, sell it for a profit, bank the cash.
Sounds good. What would kind of be your preference in terms of someone starting with some money? I mean, what advice would you give if they said, you know, like, maybe should I get into development as a beginner, or should I look at just buy-to-lets? What would you say might be?
Well, there's a point. It's always good to stretch yourself and step outside your comfort zone, but you have to be realistic. You know, so you know, you don't want to take on a 10-unit office to resi conversion as your first deal.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be out of your depth. You're probably going to screw it up, and you'd struggle to get anyone to think you were credible to lend to anyway. So, you know, it's a process of scaling up. I mean, you know, I watch a lot of people and what they do over the years, and people that start off with a little small refurb, you know, within 5 years, they are doing, you know, 10-unit conversion projects. So, I think stretch yourself and do something that's challenging, but keep it realistic.
Kev, obviously you've been in the game a long time. When you sort of hear the phrase millionaire young, what does that kind of bring to mind? What does that mean to you?
Aspiration. It's aspiration. I mean, it's you know, it's people that have got aspirations to achieve. And great, listen, why wouldn't you do that? Most young people, along with most older people too, would believe that to be beyond their capability, because they have a very limited outlook on life.
Sure.
So great, yeah. I would encourage anyone to do that.
And just as we sort of wrap up, money or love?
Money or love?
Yeah.
Love.
There you go. You had to think about that, didn't you?
Yeah. Just check in. I understood the question.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.